My name is Ramakrishna. I am the officer in charge of the Nabard office in New Delhi. I will very briefly talk about what Nabard is and what Nabard does for the startups. By the way, I think all of us know startups are important, and each one, perhaps each one of you will give a different reason as to why it's important. But incidentally, I was seeing this Kapil Sharma show on startups, when he had these startups on his TV. And then it really makes you realize that they have such a huge and very useful contribution to the GDP of the country when he was trying to, accumulate their net worths. And do you know how long it takes for a startup to become a unicorn? I'm talking about unicorn because I'm a funder. Nabard is a funding agency. So I believe it takes anywhere between 6 months for a startup to become a unicorn to 37 years. Yeah? So with that, I think I would thank ICRA for having given me the opportunity here, and I think I will address you as prospective startups, and would-be unicorns. Yeah, which is what is in everyone's mind when they really set up a startup. And obviously, startups are also there to solve some problems. So, Nabard, as you all know, is the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development. Yeah, and we have a vision of being the development bank of the nation for fostering rural prosperity. So I think it's quite a huge vision and quite a broad vision, which enables us to do many things which we keep doing. Many times they don't seem related, but then if you look at the vision, I think one would understand that. And how we do this, to achieve our vision, we have a mission of promoting sustainable and equitable, interventions, whether credit or non-credit, and also developmental. That is broadly the mission. And we have the head office in Mumbai. We have about 31 regional offices. We have 4 training establishments, 3 for the client institutions, because Nabard is a refinancing agency with a huge mandate for development. So we have a lot of clients in the form of the banking system, the rural banking system, the NGO, the civil society organizations, the local government officials in the districts. So we have 4 training centers. We also have about 377 district offices. That is, we have a reach into the district, and we also have 19 cluster offices through whom we manage all the 700 hot districts in the country. We have a huge, human resource base of about 2,200 professionals who do anything from agriculture to finance to infrastructure development to even working with startups. This is broadly our balance sheet size. As of last year, we were about 6.5 lakh crore. We hope to touch this 7.5 lakh crore this year. Very briefly, what Nabard does. Nabard, I think we have 4 major functions. One is credit and refinance. We are a bank to the banks. Yeah. So we don't directly deal with retail clients. We are a bank to all the banks in the country, whether public sector, private sector, foreign banks, the regional rural bank, the cooperative bank, the small finance bank, the payment banks, banks of all hues and sizes. Credit and refinance, we provide loans to the banks, both short-term working capital purposes and also term lending purposes, broadly in all areas of agriculture and rural development. We also provide credit for infrastructure development. State governments are the major beneficiaries of this product of ours. We have close to sanction about 4 lakh crores for development of infrastructure in the rural areas. We have an outstanding of close to 2 lakh crores. Infrastructure, again, whether it be a rural road or a rural school or a rural bridge or an irrigation structure or a school, or a hospital, or a market, rural market. So we have about 38 different types of activities which are classified as rural activities for infrastructure, and we lend to the state governments. Almost every year we sanction about 40,000 crores only for this alone. Incidentally, we have about 1/4 of the rural infrastructure financing market with us. So that's about credit and refinance. And we have another important function, which is supervision. Nabard has been empowered by the Banking Regulation Act to supervise the rural banks, which is the regional rural banks and the rural cooperative banks. They are exclusively supervised by Nabard, and we pass on the supervision reports to the Reserve Bank of India, who is the regulator. There can be only one banking regulator, and Reserve Bank of India is the banking regulator. We support the Reserve Bank of India in regulating the rural finance space. So supervision is an important function of ours, through which we have a lot of influence over the rural institutions. While we do supervise them, because we want the rural financing institution to be strong and sustainable, we also have a developmental arm of Nabard. Incidentally, 50% of our staff is involved in one development form or the other. We have an institutional development department which takes the responsibility of ensuring that the cooperative bank, the regional rural banks, people working in the banks are trained properly. The banks are able to deliver services which are needed. For example, we have ensured that all the cooperative banks in the country develop a CBS, because CBS, the commercial banks used to have them, but then the cooperative banks are small institutions. It was very difficult for them to have a CBS on their own, and therefore Nabard enabled all the cooperative banks to be on CBS, which was a requirement of the regulator. So that is one example of development in the institutional development space. We also have what is called the Watershed development programs in the country. About 2.3 million hectares of waste and dry land has been made into productive land, which produces many crops today. We take almost anywhere between 5 to 10 years to ensure that land which looks brown in the picture becomes green in the picture after 5 or 10 years. Then we also work with about 500,000 tribal families to ensure that they have a comprehensive and sustainable form of livelihood. This we do by helping them plant orchards or fruit trees in their 1 acre of land, which we train them in maintaining them and taking care of them. And incidentally, when I was talking to one tribal family, he said that you have done a great thing. You have ensured that I get pension for the next 40 years. Yeah, because every year these orchards provide them income, and sometimes it's quite substantial. So that is what we do with the tribal families. This is what we do in the agriculture development space. We also have incidentally, I think when a small borrower or a person of small means goes to a bank, he is not very welcome, because his requirements are very small. He wants to save 100 rupees, or he wants to borrow 1,000 rupees or 5,000 rupees. This is very difficult for a bank to handle. And therefore, Nabard, with a lot of action research oriented studies, we have developed something called as the self-help group bank linkage product. We organize the rural poor people into groups. We ask them to save their own money in the groups and lend that money within the groups, so that they learn basic aspects of financial management. And then they take this history of working within the group to the bank to show their credit histories and perhaps borrow. What we started off with about 500 groups in 1992. Today we have about 1.3 crore groups in the country. 1.3 crore groups have provided access to almost 20 crore, that is 200 million rural people who never were a part of the banking system earlier. So that is another example of development which we do. So now I think let me talk about why we have got into this, the agriculture space. Incidentally, when Nabard does provide support to the startups, mostly in the agri and rural space. We don't get into other space because there are lots of other institutions to do that. So, uh, as I told you, why do we need startups? We need startups to solve some problem, yeah, a challenge or a problem which is normally solved by the startups. And normally, if a startup has to be successful or become big or grow big, it needs to scale up. And for scaling up, you need to have a good business model, and perhaps having technology is also very useful. Uh, um, so these are the types of challenges which we intend that the startups will solve in the agri and rural space. I will not go into each of these problems because instantly there are about 7 or 8 startups who have been supported by indirectly by Nabard through our incubator, who are having stalls in the exhibition. I would encourage you to go and have a look at them. Yeah. So I think these are all the opportunities for agri-tech startups which people can um, look at. And we feel that technology is quite an important thing if one has to achieve scale, if one has to ensure that you're efficient in what you're doing. I think technology really helps, and we do support agri-tech startups. So now just a brief about what Nabard does for startups. See, incidentally, I think after the Government of India's, the Honorable Prime Minister's initiatives of Stand Up India and Startup India, uh, a lot of young professionals have, got energized perhaps, and also got motivated, and they're having a lot of startups. But then startups are not funded by the conventional banks, because a conventional bank will only fund something which has been time tested, and startups do require funds. And I think after this, perhaps Startup India and Stand Up India, the venture capital space has evolved quite a bit. But even today, if you see the fundings that come from venture capital, 85% of it goes to the consumer tech, the fintech, yeah, the regular, the software as a service. The startups in the agriculture sector, I believe about 15% of the VC funds go to these startups. And even those 15% of the funds, they don't go to agriculture startups who solve the problems of small farmers. They go to startups which solve the problems of contract farming or the huge farmers, because that is where there is also an opportunity to scale up for the startups. So it's not really a problem of the startups, but then it's a problem of the ecosystem which we need to support and build. And therefore, I think Nabard's priority is always to look at startups who help the small and marginal farmers increase his income. Yeah, that is one priority for us. We also look at startups who solve problems of productivity and logistics and supply chain issues in agriculture, but eventually also helping the small and marginal farmers. If you look at the last year's funding for startups, the Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, they have come up with a report that about 57 startups have been provided venture capital in the agriculture and food sector. And they also say that if you look at the ranking of the agriculture and food sector, by value of the deals done on by venture capital, agriculture comes about 12th out of 22 sectors, and by the number of deals, agriculture and food sector, they come 5th or 6th. So things are not so bad, and Nabard has been in the we have been set up in 1982, so we are quite 38 years plus. We've been trying to work with startups for the last 10 years, but then since we did not have our own experience, what we did initially was we tried to invest in alternate investment funds which invested in agriculture startups. Our only condition to them was, I give you 100 crores and you should give at least 200 crores to the agriculture and rural startups. That was the condition. And we have invested about 530 odd crores in these agriculture alternate investment funds. And these investment funds have in turn provided investment support to agri startups to the extent of 1,500 crores. So we wanted a 2x investment into these tech startups, but we almost got a 3x investment, which is quite good. So after doing this for about 10 years, we thought it's time for us to set up our own venture fund, which can directly invest in agri startups. So in the year 2018, we set up what is called the Nav Ventures. Nav Ventures is a 100% owned subsidiary of Nabard, and Nav Ventures has set up a fund called Nav Ventures 1 with about 500 crores corpus and with a green shoe option of 200 crores. We have almost raised the fund to its full extent, and the fund has already started investing in about 6 to 8 startups. So another way which Nabard also tries to support the startup ecosystem is by supporting incubators. Incubators have a very useful role in the whole startup supply chain or the value chain. We have supported about 7 incubators in agriculture universities. For example, I think the Hisar Agriculture University in Haryana, we have supported ABIC, which has supported multiple startups in the agri space, and 7 or 8 of them are exhibiting their products here. They get help from the domain expertise to testing of the products to getting space. Someone was talking of getting space for the startups who start up initially. So giving them space, providing them the linkage to the market, linkage to the funding agencies, linkage to other domain experts, linkage to other startups. This is what all these incubators do. And I think the incubation center in Haryana and in Madurai, we also have one in Madurai, which is in the Tamil Nadu Agriculture University, which they are doing extremely well, and we are very happy that close to 100 startups in this space have come, and incidentally 7 of them are unicorns. Yeah. So so with this, I think I would stop, because all of you may be feeling hungry, and I would encourage you to see out the exhibition of the startups which are here, and you can get in touch with us at Nabard, either in Delhi, or we have an office in every state government, in every state capital. So you can get in touch with Nabard for any support that you may want to have regarding startups. We may not directly help you, but then we will connect you and network you to the right people in the business. So thank you very much.